but he was a feral cat. And
Really?
yes, he moved into my house a month ago. And I have four other cats. I have
Oh.
Elvis Presley, Christopher Columbus, Albert Einstein, and Pablo Picasso. Correct. I heard stories of people with schizophrenia saying that it always starts as a place of refuge
Yeah,
where you run away from the pains of life.
yeah,
And in the beginning, it's very warm and welcoming and pleasant. And
absolutely.
then it becomes a trap.
The fortress becomes a prison. I got all of that same awful feeling and the same remove and the same confusion and the same fear and the same all that stuff. And then I said to myself, what is this for? As soon as you say that, the game changes. How does this serve me? What's this doing for me?
So, would you agree that the first step to be able to break free is realizing that you want something else and that you want to find another space where you could change your life?
I think so. And that's why courage is the first thing. A doctor once said to me, "You're very lucky. What you have hurts so much that you will do anything to get out of it. There are people who don't hurt that much. They can live with this hell because it's not that bad."
Then it takes an enormous amount of courage to drop everything you've known so far and step into the unknown. But it's
Frieda used to
unknown.
say, "I'm asking you to dive from a diving board and hope that the water's there."
Yeah.
So the courage has to blend with hope also.
So, my name is Beata Pawlikowska. I'm a journalist, a writer, and a traveler from Poland. For a few years now, I've been interested in science, especially neurobiology and mental health problems, but generally mental health. And one day I looked up Joanne Greenberg, the author of the book I Never Promised You a Rose Garden, and the most famous patient of Dr. Frida from Reichmann, a psychiatrist specializing in treating schizophrenia with psychotherapy, effectively treating schizophrenia with psychotherapy. And if in your country, as in mine, schizophrenia is explained as an incurable disease caused by some genetic defect, this conversation may bring you hope and may completely change the way you look at schizophrenia and mental health problems in general. Because Joanne Greenberg was diagnosed with schizophrenia when she was 16. It took her 3 years of psychotherapy with Dr. Frida from Reichmann, and she did heal. And she's a thriving human being. She wrote 21 novels, 4 books of short stories, countless songs, poems, and articles. And she's 90 years old, 90 years old, and she's writing another novel. Here's my conversation with one and only Joanne Greenberg. Today, my guest is Joanne Greenberg. And I must say, I'm so happy and I'm so honored to have Joanne on the podcast because Joanne Greenberg is a legend. She has written 21 books,
Yeah.
4 books of short stories, 21 novels, 4 books of short stories, and countless articles, poems, and songs. And she graduated from the American University in Washington with majors in anthropology and English literature and worked as a professor at Colorado School of Mines. And she's also the most famous patient of Dr. Frida from Reichmann, a psychiatrist who specialized in healing people with schizophrenia using psychotherapy. So, Joanne, welcome and thank you for
Thank
being here.
you. Thank
I
you.
have just I have just finished reading your wonderful book. I Never Promised You a Rose Garden. This is the latest edition. And this book was written 50 years ago.
Yeah.
And even though it was written so long ago, it shows a very humanistic and loving way of treating mental health problems, which I think is still very rare. Can you tell us more about your doctor, Dr. Frida from
All right.
Brighton?
Well, she didn't look like a doctor. She wasn't chic. There's a movie that was made of this where the doctor is so chic, she would never relate to her patients at all. She was an anomaly. She was a cultured, highly cultured German Jewish lady of her age, which should have been tight and structured, and she was none of those things. She had a very interesting youth, I think. She was born in Germany, in Karlsruhe.
Yeah, I think it was 1889.
Yeah. In World War One, they took all the Jews out of Karlsruhe.
Yeah.
World War II, they took out all the Jews out of Karlsruhe again. So her life was certainly not easy. She was raped when she was a girl, which I didn't know. Now, I didn't know any of these things.
Mhm.
She had the capacity to change herself in a way that amazes me, that as a doctor, it's this and this and this. You're open. As I said once, she would swing from the chandelier like Tarzan if she thought it would do any good.
She was one of the first, or she was the first woman to finish the medical university in Karlsruhe in Germany.
Yeah.
And then she had to go, yeah.
And she spoke of it. She said that the professor would say, a gentleman and lady, and lady. And
Yeah, that's amazing.
really separating her from everybody. She wanted to be obstetrician.
I see.
But she was tiny. If she was 5'3", I'd be surprised. And she didn't have the strength. You have to lift somebody or all of that stuff. So she thought, well, I can't be an obstetrician, so I better be a psychiatrist.
And she moved to the United States because she had to leave Germany. So
Yeah.
she followed her husband.
Yes.
And she settled in Chestnut Lodge and she became a psychiatrist there. And this is how you met. You were 16.
Well, she was a psychiatrist before that. She had, it's so funny. In these days, we think we're protest. We make a lot of noise and we're protest. She was a woman. She was a fake major in the German army. So she, as a major, she would say, well, let me take over your job as a doctor. You can go and, play in the sun or whatever, and I'll do all the work and you can get all the credit. And so she was working with brain damaged soldiers and learning from all of that. And so when the Germans were losing World War I and they were evacuating, she said, I'm not going to evacuate. I'm a major in the army. Well, if you're a major, you I was a fake major myself. Yes, a fake major, as fake as anything you can imagine.
And when was that?
I was teaching at the Asian division for the Army. The Army wanted to keep people in, and so they were offered college credits. But if you're in the Army, you have to have a rank.
Yes.
So fake major, why not? While I was teaching, I became a major. The minute I stopped teaching, gone.
All right. So I think we will go back to a fake military ranks, because there is a question I would like to ask you a little later about a colonel. But about Dr. Frida Fromm Reichmann, I remember you saying in one of the interviews that what was really important to her, about her, was that she was courageous and she had a great sense of humor.
Absolutely.
And you say it as a patient. And I don't think this is something that doctors are being taught in medical schools. Why is it important to you as a patient that your doctor had a sense of humor?
A sense of humor has a lot to do with metaphor. She understood my metaphor. She understood other people's metaphor, because she was that sense of humor is there that allows you to understand or to work with somebody's metaphor. If you're too literal, and I've come up against that with people who are so literal that it's hard to get with them. Language is metaphor, a whole lot.
I remember in this book, you write about a doctor that you worked, who was your doctor while Dr. Frida Fromm Reichmann went for holidays, and a doctor replaced her.
Yeah.
And he was so literal, as you said.
Absolutely.
And he did everything right, and he wanted to prove to you that he is right and you are wrong. And so after many sessions with that doctor, you went back into the illness. You did not get any better. Is that right?
Yeah.
So she had a sense of humor, which let you relate to her and let her relate to you. And she also had the courage to go with you into the places which were unknown to her. And I remember you writing about her that, it's so funny and so wonderful what you said. You had a map and she has
the light. Yeah.
Yes, the light.
Yeah.
So you had the map and she was willing and ready, not scared, to follow you into your inner world, having her expertise as a psychiatrist, psychoanalyst.
You would have such a fit if, when I said psychoanalyst, and I am not a psychoanalyst, I'm a psychotherapist. Oh boy.
Psychotherapist. All right. So I say she was courageous, and you say that she had the courage to follow you. So what was your inner world like? Why did she have to be courageous to follow you into it?
It's a very dark place. And I think people can get swallowed up in it. She follows. Let me tell you my favorite psychiatric joke. He wanted to be a scuba diver. So he took lessons, 6 months of lessons, scuba diver, and you have to get the right equipment, of course, top of the line, the goggles and the outfit and all of that, including a slate and a special pencil that you could write your impressions. And he goes down into the Caribbean, which is money. All that costs money. But it's worth every cent of it. He's down there swimming, and there's the lovely prawns and the fish, and wonderful. He looks over there, and there's this sap over there, waving around like an idiot, hasn't had a lesson, obviously doesn't have the right outfit. And this guy gets mad. I've paid all this money for this, and here's this jerk swimming around. So he writes on the slate, "What are you doing here?" Turns a slate. The guy writes back and turns, "Drowning." Okay. The therapist is swimming. The patient is drowning. The therapist has to have enough insight to be in the water with the patient, but swimming, not drowning. So they're all of that together.
And it takes courage.
And it takes courage.
Because you have to enter a world full of fear, anxiety, dark thoughts, and unknowns.
Yeah.
And Dr. Bertram Caron, an American psychiatrist who took over from what Frida Fromm-Reichmann was saying, he said that schizophrenia is a state of chronic fear. Would you agree with that?
I would say chronic loneliness. I would say loneliness that's not the loneliness you have when you're, even the loneliness that I have when Albert's gone. He died in November. I'm now December, January, February, March, 4 months out.
I'm so sorry.
It's common loneliness. I know that it's common run, but also when I go to the synagogue, when I go to with friends, even the market, I know a lot of people because I've been around long enough. They understand what I'm going through. They can get to me. They can be with me, even if they don't say anything. That loneliness is not the loneliness I'm talking about. This is a loneliness of people who don't understand a word I'm saying, or think they understand, or because I'm drowning and I'm waving around. I mean, imagine somebody who was just waving around, and you say, "Well, why are you struggling?" I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a different kind of loneliness, and of course, there's fear involved in it too.
Mm-hmm.
My God, I look like my grandmother. What a pity. This is not the face that I am familiar with.
I'm going to use a big word, but I think love is one of the most scarce things to find in contemporary world. And would you agree whether we say, as Dr. Bertram Caron said, it's a state of chronic fear, or whether we say it's a state of chronic loneliness? Would you agree that a good psychotherapist should be a person that is able to give love to the patient, the feeling of love? Is this what's missing in our world? Is this why people feel lonely or feel fear so deep that it takes over and then turns into a mental problem?
I would say trust first. Love is something that I don't think you can measure. And plus, they're all different kinds. I have kids I love. I have my husband I loved. I have friends I love. I love my life. But the trust, what does somebody, a writer by the name of, I forget, said that everybody needs somebody who can say to them, you're okay. And it's not your parents, it's somebody else from the outer world, from that world that says, you're all right, you're doing all right, you're okay. You're worthwhile and you're okay. And I think that's very basic. The love, I think, comes later.
When I said love, I meant loving understanding without judgment.
Yeah.
Kindness. Because love is usually understood as a relationship with someone. But what I meant by love was just being kind without judging, being open without any expectations or without trying to change somebody.
Yeah.
So from
Makes
your
sense.
experience, thank you.
Makes sense. Yeah.
What would be the most important quality in a doctor with a person with schizophrenia or some other mental problem? What would be the most important quality in a doctor?
Well, it would have to be a few things. Remember, I think courage is first. Courage is first. A kind of intelligence. If you need intelligence because, oh, this is hard. Because you have to know when to do what. You have to know when to stop probing, when to stop, when to start, when to push it a little, when not to. And that's IQ. You have to, think. But you also have to be emotionally free yourself. Most good therapists have been in therapy themselves because your own nonsense can get in the way. So courage, intelligence, and that sense of humor, which is wide enough for metaphor.
How about empathy?
How
about empathy?
Empathy, well, too, yes, but you can't get dragged in.
Yeah. So, can you tell us a little more about the courage? Why should a doctor be courageous? Why would they need to have the courage for?
Well, I think everybody needs courage. Knowing that we don't know what's going to happen to us 3 minutes from now. But yet, every day, I think God admires us for courage. Look at them. They don't know what the hell is going on. Every morning they get up, they put on their clothes, they go out into what Alan Dugan calls the daily accident. You know what? Okay, bring it on.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
In Poland, where I live, the doctors often say that schizophrenia is a genetic, incurable disease.
I know.
What do you think about that?
I think I fought that all my sane life. Number one, incurable. 1/3 of us get up off the floor, spit out the carpet, and get on with it. Another third, more than a third of the second can have help and make it through. The last group are the ones you see talking to their shoes or whatever, blowing square bubbles, who don't fit in. Now I'm going to give you Greenberg's mushroom theory. See, idiom and metaphor. There is a mushroom that grows in our place, maybe grows in yours, which is a perfectly legitimate, honorable mushroom, edible and delightful. But it has the capacity for taking selenium up from the soil. Selenium is a perfectly good chemical. We all need it in order to live. However, the mushroom concentrates the selenium and becomes a poison mushroom. That's my mushroom theory. Yes, a propensity, who knows? But the right environment or the wrong environment. I think most serious mental illness, I would call it extreme state. Most extreme states have trauma in the background somewhere. I got somebody at a New Year's Day party once, backed him up against the wall and said, "Why aren't you crazy? You had all of this stuff going on. And I want to know why you are not crazy." Now, I've asked this question of 3-4 people, and they come up with this more or less the same answer. I had somebody in my life, I had a few people in my life who I could go to for validation, or I got the right environment. I went to the school, and I loved the school, and I was there. Or I went to the hospital, and it was good for me. Some people even say I got it in jail, which is famous for destroying people. Yeah. So there has to be some place, but maybe it has a partly genetic for propensity, but I don't think it's genetic. There are too many people who come out of it, and even the sickest people, when they get older, they find some way to harmonize with their environment. I'm not crazy about overusing drugs, which dim you down. Yes, they stop violence, true. But they also dim you down, and long term, liver damage, kidney damage, your eyes go, all of that.
Dr. Bertram Caron, the psychiatrist, said that he has never met a patient who had an easy life or a good life. And he said, people do not get sick because they had good lives. In every patient's history, there is something that happened that brought them suffering,
Yeah.
trauma, and that was a turning point. So that's probably should be a beginning when there is a patient and doctor meeting. What has happened to you in the past, and how can we heal the scar that you're carrying inside?
I think that part of it is that, I mean, everybody, most people have some kind of trauma. But if it's not acknowledged, I think that's what does it. I had a nightmare. And in the nightmare, I don't want to go into this whole nightmare, but there was a really traumatic thing. And when the person in the nightmare landed on the shore of this, the people didn't believe him. That couldn't have happened to you. That's when he went off the rails. This was my husband, whom I had the nightmare about when he was a boy. Yeah. So it's not only the trauma. If the trauma is laughed at, if the trauma is not acknowledged, if the trauma is blamed on you, like the beaten up women who somebody says, why did you make him beat you up? This is enough to drive somebody off the rails.
Yeah, because then you want to withdraw from the life that is around you, and you go into your inner world, and it's easy to start drowning in this world.
Well, here's another metaphor which I like. Look at a defensive building. Look at it. It's got little windows because shooting in. It's got thick walls because of protection. It's got a drawbridge and a moat all around it. Uh-oh, that's a prison. So what starts out as a defense ends up as a prison.
That's very important what you said, because that's the way of understanding another human being having a problem. And if we see this other person as a fortress, he's hiding inside because he was feeling so fragile, or she was feeling so fragile, that they needed to build this fortress around
exactly
them. Yeah.
But look what happened.
Yeah.
It starts as a good thing.
Yeah.
Look what happened.
Yeah. And this book, I Never Promised You a Rose Garden, it was first published in 1964, and it was published under the name of Hannah Green.
Hannah Green. The closest I could get to my real name. Why?
Please tell us why. It's a wonderful story. Yes.
Okay. Well, my mother said, I don't want you to remember this. The stigma at that time was much more than it is now. People from Hollywood are talking about their addictions or their psychological problems now, which they never did back in the day when I was growing up. My mother said, if you're going to make a fool of yourself, do it out of town.
All right. I don't
and
remember.
I thought,
yeah.
Well, the family, there were family who didn't know any of this. We had a very large family, and they didn't know. My husband was a psychotherapist. Was a psychiatric social worker, and his buddies would come up, and we'd have dinner, And when this book was coming out, I thought, let me see what I can do. So I asked the buddies, when you know all this stuff, you work with people coming out of mental hospitals, you work with these people who are damaged. Is that curable? And they all said, no, you can have remission, but you can't have cure. Well, our son had epilepsy. And I thought, that's all he needs, is to have this family background thing. And Albert's coworkers, would look at me waiting for the minute when I would blow up. Who wants to do that? So I said, okay, we'll have a pseudonym. And I used to have nightmares about it, because if you spend your whole life trying for authenticity and you've got to lie about this, the best thing that happened to me was when I met Albert at the very beginning. Do you know that story? You do.
Yes, I do, but please go
Well,
ahead.
I was doing a favor for a friend. She said, would you come to me? I'm this guy was interested in her. She couldn't see him. He was brilliant. He was a friend of mine from college. And come to me. There are 5 guys in this house, and I don't want to be alone in the house with the 5 guys. Sure, we were both engaged to other people, by the way. I was engaged, and okay, sure. So I went there, and I had been lying steadily through college. In the summer jobs, I went here, I went there. I faked like anything, lied like a carpet. And so we had the dinner that you would expect from 5 guys in a big house. And we were sitting around after dinner talking. It got so comfortable and so easy. My fiance was a nuclear physicist. And I knew he was speaking English because he used and the. But he was speaking science. His friends were all scientists. They were quite arrogant. They thought the sun shone out of their ears. And I thought, well, this is the best I can do. So that's okay. And I was never that comfortable in my life. And I looked around and I thought, God, I would be in no other place if I could choose. There's no other place I would rather be than sitting right here, right now. And that struck me. And there was this guy there who was a part of the group. And he was talking, and he said something about that he had wanted to work in my hospital but they didn't treat alcoholics. I said, yes, they do. He said, oh. And then he said, well, there are these different hours. And I said, no. The hours for the main building are. And he said, oh, you work there. And I thought 2 things. The first thing I thought was, these people don't deserve my lie. They deserve the truth. And the second is, goodbye. And I said, no, I was a patient there. Well, of course, that stopped the conversation cold. And into the silence, he said, they did a hell of a job. And I thought, boy, Oh, you have a friend. Who
Actually, I
is
have
that?
five friends.
Five
This is
friends?
this is Johnny Cash.
Oh, she or he? He is
It's a he,
beautiful.
but he was a feral cat. And
Really?
yes, he moved into my house a month ago. And I have four other cats. I have
Oh.
Elvis Presley, Christopher Columbus, Albert Einstein, and Pablo Picasso. All right. Thank you for this wonderful story. And that's how you met your husband. No wonder.
Uh-huh.
No wonder.
No wonder.
Um, is it is this okay if we go back to when you were a child?
Yes.
Johnny, get down.
If I had had a cat, things would have turned out better.
So would this be okay if we went back to when you were a child and you created your own world? Because
Yes.
you must have felt that the world around you did not serve you well. You did not
Correct.
feel safe, you did not feel understood, and you didn't feel
Correct.
connected
Yeah.
to this world. So you created your own world, and it was an amazing place that you called Ear.
Yeah.
Can you tell us more about this? What was it like?
Well, I mean, in the beginning, it was a fortress, and which ended up as a prison.
In the beginning, it was a beautiful fortress.
Oh yeah.
Wasn't it? It was
Oh yeah.
warm and shining and friendly.
Yeah. I think there's a difference between hallucination and vision, which is just here or just there. People want to think that Joan of Arc was crazy because she saw things. I think she had visions. I think the difference between a vision and a hallucination is meaning. What meaning is. If your life has no meaning, you can't learn. Because everything could mean anything else.
Yeah.
It could mean life or death or the 4th of July. And there's no way of separating or so I mean, it was good. It was great. I was there. I could leave at any time. I had the choice of leaving at any time. Mm. And all of a sudden, you don't have the choice of leaving at any time. So you're half and half. And people are wondering where you are because your attention is someplace else. People think that's a good idea, but it isn't. It isn't. It is not good. I'm not saying that fantasy is bad. I'm not saying that creating things. All right, I am naturally interested in language. I can't speak Polish because they don't know how to spell. I would love to learn Polish. I would love to learn Navajo. I would love to learn the different languages, and I'm good at it. So that just sifted into a language all my own. Well, I mean, you know, and I know that language is meant to communicate both with yourself and with other people. So, I mean, what is the good of a language spoken by one person to one person?
You quoted examples of that language in this book, and it makes the book even more fascinating. because the words are so beautiful and you created them, and that's
Uh-huh.
amazing. So I heard stories of people with schizophrenia saying that it always starts as a place of refuge
Yeah.
where you run away from the pains of life.
Yeah.
And in the beginning, it's very warm and welcoming and pleasant.
Absolutely.
Then it becomes a trap.
The fortress becomes a prison. Yeah.
So you have no control over the warm and sunny place turning into a dark and cold place where you became the prisoner.
That's one great thing that the therapy does. You do have control. When I was getting better, I had a return of all my symptoms. I was on a bus, I remember. And I got all of that same awful feeling and the same remove and the same confusion and the same fear and the same all that stuff. And then I said to myself, what is this for? As soon as you say that, the game changes. How does this serve me? What's this doing for me?
To be able
Oh,
to
wait
ask
a
this
minute.
question.
Wait a minute. Then you can't be psychotic anymore. You have to give it up.
To be able to ask this question, you have to be aware, you have to be conscious
Yeah.
of what you're thinking and what you're feeling, and realize the thought and the emotion before it becomes too overwhelming.
Right.
So I had depression for about 20 years. And what helped me was realizing that I was holding on to the depression because it was the only thing I knew.
Yeah.
So would you agree that this is the case with most of mental problems, that we are in a state that we start to identify with because that's the only space we know, recognize, and even if it's scary, this is where we feel safe, so we want to keep it.
Yeah. I would agree.
Thank you. So would you agree that the first step to be able to break free is realizing that you want something else, and that you want to find another space where you could change your life?
I think so. And that's why courage is the first thing.
Do you remember
But
the
there's
moment
also curiosity.
Mhm.
That I've seen at the hospital what I call healthy illness and ill illness. A doctor once said to me, "You're very lucky. What you have hurts so much that you will do anything to get out of it. There are people who don't hurt that much.
Mhm.
So they can live with this hell because it's not that bad."
Yeah. And do you remember the moment that you realized that what you have in your life is a prison that's holding you against your will? And do you remember the moment that you thought that you want to become free from this?
I think there's 8 moments, 7 moments all along the line. The first moment is a sense of being present in yourself. Who is that self anyway? And then you start saying, well, this self is is half a self. It's a self I don't want, and a self I don't like, and there's another self. That takes some sophistication, I think, to think about that, even to think about that, and courage and curiosity. What's on the other side of this?
Was this what you learned from your psychotherapist?
Yeah,
Mhm.
from the treatment. Also, there are other people. There were people in the hospital, attendants, cleaning people, anybody
Mhm.
who validates this trip you're on. And that's so important. I mean, and just people, friends, people can do it. My friends do it. What's bad and harmful is that all of the things I now use were not available to me. When I'm feeling low or bad, I call up my friends, or I used to go skiing. I listen to music. I sing music. There's no high in the world like being in the midst, surrounded by gorgeous music and adding to it.
Yeah.
All the different highs you can get in the world were not available.
Mhm.
So you're left with these rags.
I have a private question, and I hope you will not mind me asking it. When you left Chestnut Lodge, you were 16, and it
I was
was
18. I was 19.
19, yes, and because you spent in Chestnut Lodge 3 years. And so it was the beginning of the 50s.
Yeah.
Do you remember the music of Elvis Presley? Because this is where he started. And this is the false military rank, because his manager was a colonel, but he was not
Ah,
really a colonel.
Elvis was not my boy.
He was not. All right.
Palestrina was.
All right. I see.
William Byrd was my boy.
I
Pre-Baroque.
see. Okay.
Pre-Baroque before. I joined a church choir and sang with the church for a year. I did. I went to Tanglewood. Do you ever hear of Tanglewood? I went to Tanglewood
Right.
and sang with Leonard Bernstein. Oh yeah,
That's wonderful.
it was. I was singing, and I was enjoying and learning. Remember all of the adolescent stuff that you go through. I don't know if you know about the malt shop, where you've been doing sodas and sit around with your boyfriend, get boyfriends, drop boyfriends, pick up no boyfriends, all of that garbage. I never had.
All right.
So I was lacking every social skill they make.
I see.
And I had to learn all that stuff
Mm-hmm.
quick, the hard way.
Yeah.
And I got my GED. That's your high school equivalency. And I started college. And in my sophomore year, I had to return to the hospital because I didn't know who she was. I mean, here's this person who's doing this stuff,
Yeah.
and I didn't recognize her.
Mm.
And I was 2 weeks in the hospital and came back and never went back again.
Mm-hmm. And you wrote about it in this book too. And in the afterword to the latest edition, you wrote that freedom is the reward for courage.
Yeah.
Can you tell us more about that, please?
Well, I'm, as you can say, I'm big on, I'm big on courage because I think it does so much. Now, again, courage without intelligence is recklessness. So you have to have some kind of an IQ along with the courage. And of course, all the other stuff. A friend of mine says that evil is having one virtue, only one.
Mhm.
And it figures to be true. You need more than one.
And when you said that freedom is the reward for courage, was it for, because when I read the afterword, after having read the book, I
Yeah,
read the afterword, and I thought that the freedom is the reward for courage was a word for people who are struggling,
yeah,
who are trying to overcome whatever happened in their lives and in their
hmm,
psyche. And so if you make a decision to free yourself from the prison that your subconscious mind has created for you, you will be rewarded with freedom. Did
yeah,
I?
yeah,
That's, thank you. But it always starts with realizing that I want to make a step in a different direction, or I want
yeah,
to find another way, because living the way I have been living so far brought me to a fortress or a prison where I don't want to stay anymore.
yeah. It's not working.
Then it takes an enormous amount of courage to drop everything you've known so far and step into the unknown.
Frida
It
used
may
to
be
say,
better, it may be nice, but yeah, but it's
Frida used
unknown.
to say, I'm asking you to dive from a diving board and hope that the water's there.
Yeah.
So the courage has to blend with hope also. So there are all of these things,
Mm.
including the sense of humor, hope, courage, and they dip and spill into each other
Mhm.
and make um, life is hard and it's tragic. The death rate is 100%.
But on the other hand, the life is long and you
Yeah.
can do so many wonderful things with it.
Oh yeah.
And speaking of wonderful things and long lives, you have written 21 novels.
Would you
And
believe it?
yeah, it's amazing and it's wonderful. Can you tell us more about what their novels are about? Because this is an autobiography, kind of
Kind of.
autobiography. Mhm. But the other books are stories born from your mind, right?
Well, it's not only my
Not only,
mind.
I remember the story about the sign language.
Uh-huh.
Mhm.
I'm not deaf.
I know, but you learned the sign language.
Yeah.
What would be the next book I should read of yours? Which one would you recommend and why?
I would have to figure out what you're like. If you like Looney Tunes, uh, I would recommend the short stories. There's a lot of what if in the short stories. What if somebody quit believing in God and then quit believing in banks and then quit believing in germs and then quit believing in gravity? And she would go up with the sheets when she changed the bed. Um, fantasy things. I've been a maxillofacial surgeon and a lawyer and a wheat farmer and a person who walked from California to Woods Hole, and a child abuser, and a bunch of other things. It's fun.
happy to read your
I've
short
killed
stories.
people, but I don't. I not detective. I admire those people, the way they can think up plots for their murders. I was on a fire department and rescue team for 13 years. So most of my deaths are caused by traffic accidents. I killed people with traffic accidents. What would I recommend for you? What do you like? What are you reading these days?
I loved reading this book, but the short stories, I will definitely read your short stories.
Okay.
That's a wonderful
Your
idea.
English,
And
by the way, is superb. How did that happen?
Thank you. So when I was 16, I fell in love with the Beatles.
Oh,
And I wanted to understand what they were singing about.
I'll be darned.
So I did anything I could to be able to understand and speak, hoping maybe one day I'll meet them
The
and talk to them.
Beatles. Ah,
And
they were
I
late.
know that
They were late for me, but that's fine. They were beautiful.
they were just after Elvis. So they were like the beginning of the 60s. 63, 64 were the first records. But if you were not into Elvis, that you were probably not.
Well, I was past Elvis somehow.
And I know that now you're working on another book. Is this true?
Yeah.
Can you tell us some of it about it?
I am off the schedule because of Albert. I want to wait a year before I do anything. But it's percolating in my mind.
It's a novel?
Yeah. Okay. It's like getting a kit in the mail, but the kit, it doesn't have any instructions. So you don't know whether it's the ship kit or the motorcycle kit or the birdhouse kit.
I see.
You may think you're doing the birdhouse kit, but here are all these extra parts. So it must be the ship kit. This must be a ship in the end.
I'll be looking forward to reading your latest novel. And thank you so much for being here with us and talking to me. And I'm like, I read about you because I was reading the biography of Frida from Reichmann, because I wanted to write a book because when I realized the different things which are not being said in Poland about schizophrenia, about the open dialogue, which treats up to 75% of people in Lapland, and about the psychotherapy, about Dr. Bertram Karon and Frida from Reichmann. I was reading her biography. I read about you, and I looked you up on internet, and I wrote you an email, and you kindly replied. So it's a miracle to me that you replied and you accepted my invitation. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
You are very, very welcome.
You really made my day. Thank you very much, Joan.
You made my day too.
For this. Thank you. Thank you very much for this conversation. Looking forward to reading your latest novel. Thank you, and bye.
Bye.
Have a great day. Thank you.
You too.